Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtual parent workshop. Tonight, we are really excited to have Dr. Shay McManus here to talk to us about how to talk to your child about their autism diagnosis. So I will turn the time over to her.
All right. Hi, guys. I am Dr. Shay McManus. I'm going to real quick share my screen here so that you guys are seeing everything. Sorry, I was telling Kimmy before we started, I just got my, I'm working with two monitors now for the first time. So I'm just getting used to where everything is. So hi, I am Dr. Shay McManus. And yeah, we're going to be talking today about how to talk to your kids about their diagnosis, how to present that information and talk to them in an affirming way so that they can really build confidence and build acceptance and build a really positive sense of identity with their autism diagnosis, with their autism as part of them and who they are, feeling good about it, feeling confident. So a little bit about me and kind of who I am. So I'm Shay McManus. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I specialize in neuropsych testing. So doing a lot of the evaluations that I'm sure plenty of you guys have completed and taken part in. No. With your kids. We do a lot of different testing, and I always, I know for a lot of people, the testing process eventually throughout a kid's life becomes kind of a formality. You have to go through it every few years to make sure you're keeping updated with services and all of that. But I like to kind of make sure that, the information that you guys get is useful, that it's something that you can share with your kids, and that it's presented in a really strengths-based and kind of reality-based way. I got really interested in neurodiversity and kind of disabilities and things like that. It's something I've been interested in throughout my life. And then when I got into psychology, really kind of understanding the neurodiversity movement and integrating that has helped me just kind of reflect on my own life. A little bit of kind of just general information about me. I grew up with a lot of neurodivergence and a lot of kind of stuff that I dealt with that I didn't necessarily have words for or names for. And so growing up and not knowing quite how to label that or how to describe that was really difficult, which is why I'm always an advocate for giving kids the language to talk about their strengths and their weaknesses, to self-advocate and ask for what they need. But that's kind of what I do. And that's generally how I approach the assessment process. And when I talk with kids about their diagnosis, whether we're doing it at a feedback session or in a therapeutic setting, that's really what I want them to know is when we talk about diagnosis, it's a way of understanding how your brain works. And giving things labels can help us to communicate and help us kind of feel empowered about talking about our needs and talking about our differences and feeling good about that. As we kind of move forward, I like to share with everybody just a general note on language. So in keeping with kind of the consistently expressed preference of the autistic and neurodivergent community, I use identity first language. Identity first language, meaning that I'm going to refer to autistic people, autistic kids, as their kind of identity first, because it's been expressed within the autistic community, within autistic adults, that they say, no, this is part of me. This is part of my identity. It's not a piece that I kind of carry around. That said, everybody is different and everybody has their own preferences. What I'm defaulting to has been kind of the result of surveyed research of what a majority of people prefer. That doesn't mean everybody prefers it. And I encourage you to always ask everybody you meet, which one do you prefer? Do you have a preference at all? How do you talk about yourself? Because the journey to kind of description and identity is exactly that. It's a journey. I'm going to move this over here so that I can see it. All right. And yeah, if somebody tells me that they have a different preference, that is in terms of their language, that's what I'm going to refer to. But and when I'm speaking kind of in the aggregate, I go to identity first language. So, all right. So when we talk about, should we tell kids about their diagnosis? That's obviously the first question. Do I tell my kid? How do I tell my kid? First question is yes, or the first answer is yes. Tell your kids. We have a ton of research that says that when people know more information about themselves, when they know their identity, when they know, oh, this is my disability, this is my neurotype or my learning style, that gives them the tools that they need to self-advocate. However, how you talk about it is really what's important. Making sure that you're presenting realistic information, making sure that you're presenting them with facts and information that they can digest in a developmentally appropriate way. Pretty recent studies have kind of come out looking at, is it good for people to know about them? Because we want to make sure that even what I'm saying is evidence-based. And studies show that it's best to tell people that they're autistic as soon as you know, so that as they grow up, as they learn, they can integrate that into their identity, into who they are, so that when a kid becomes a teenager or becomes an adult, they're not left feeling like, why is this hard for me? I don't get it. What happened? Why do I feel different? Rather than to just kind of grow up and being like, oh, because I'm different, just like everybody else is different, and my difference has a name. People who are diagnosed at a later age or who learn about their diagnosis at a later age have reported consistently in the research feeling more positive after getting the diagnosis and feeling better able to kind of put language to and express some of the struggles that they had in their life, rather than feeling like, am I wrong? Am I broken? What's going on? Why don't I seem to fit in? Whatever a kid's diagnosis is, whatever an adult's diagnosis is, having those labels allows them to say, hey, I'm autistic and I'm really sensitive to sounds. Do you mind if I wear these headphones? It gives them the opportunity to say, I need a minute to process this. Can I come back to you? You know, this is what I need because this is how my brain works. And when we put labels on that, it actually helps the rest of people understand. The corollary I always think about is I'm allergic to bees. So if I am ever outside and I'm around, and bees come around, I will probably start getting really tense and probably start looking really paranoid and maybe get up and move around a lot. And it's really easy for me to say oh, I'm allergic to bees. I'm a little afraid because if I get stung, it's kind of going to ruin my day. Without that language to say I'm allergic to bees, so I get scared, other people are left to just kind of be confused about why I'm acting this way around bees. They'll be like, well, I don't like bee stings either, but I'm fine. Or, well, it won't hurt you. It'll be fine. When you have the language to say, this is what is going on and this is why I feel or act this way, other people can understand and can kind of come to accept it a lot more. Feelings of being kind of alone in, am I the only person experiencing this? That's kind of what comes along when people don't necessarily understand their diagnosis, or when they don't understand, why is my brain like this? Why does my brain do this? It can create those feelings of loneliness. It can create those feelings of frustration and confusion. A lot of people will express, well, I don't want my kid to feel different. I don't want my kid to feel left out or anything like that. But I think that kind of my thought and my response to a lot of that is, a lot of them may already feel different. A lot of them may already kind of notice if they are slightly different than their friends or slightly different than their peers. And so kind of giving them, again, a label, a name, some descriptors to be able to describe, oh, you're not broken. You are different. Again, your friend is different because they're this way. You're different because you're this way. And that's fine. It doesn't make you more or less than them. But one of the other things that it can also do to kind of have a diagnosis and to have those words can be to create some community, to give them a word to look up, to find other people like them, and to be able to feel good and find role models that they are similar to. So now kind of knowing, all right, it is okay to talk to kids about their diagnosis. It is okay to have this conversation. The question is, how do I prepare myself for this? kind of depending on where parents are along this journey, along kind of the diagnostic spectrum, it might take some time to prepare yourself, because if you are still processing, this information, you're still processing a diagnosis. When your kid is young, you might want to go through and process that as well before you talk to your kid about it. And I understand that. Some people call this a mourning process. They call this kind of, mourning for the kid that they wish they had, or the kid, a kid's future or something like that. But one of the things that I'll say is to remember that the kid that you have after the diagnosis, they're the exact same kid. Nothing changed when you put a label on that. Nothing changed when you described it or talked to them about it. They're the same child with the same strengths and the same quirks and the same wonderful personality. Now you have a framework for understanding that. And I would encourage you, everybody here at the Chicago Autism Network, you already found a community. That's wonderful. Because one of my first kind of recommendations for parents is to find a community. Find other parents and people and doctors and professionals that they trust and they feel like they can talk to. Being a parent is hard with any kid. And when you have a kid with different needs or disabilities and things like that, it can seem extra hard. So learning from other parents, talking to other parents, talking to your doctor and people that relate to what you're going through, that's going to be helpful. Create your circle, create your community. Again, and I think the Chicago Autism Network is a really, really great community for that. My other recommendation in terms of preparing yourselves kind of and building an understanding of autism is to listen to neurodivergent people. Listen to other autistic people. They are out there, they're wonderful. They're talking about their experiences. They're writing about their needs and their supports and what has and hasn't worked for them. And they're some of the best resources to go to, because they're going to tell you, when I was a kid, this is what it was like for me. And this is what really worked and where I felt really supported and really accepted. And this is, what maybe was done in good faith and was a great attempt, and maybe it didn't work for me, or maybe it kind of caused me some anxiety. Talk to those people. Obviously, every person, especially every autistic person, is very different. Their experiences are different. But again, it's about conversations and building community and building understanding. Kind of another step in here is kind of checking your own assumptions and kind of where those assumptions came from. We all have biases when it comes to child development, when it comes to kids, and when it comes to disabilities. We all have fears. The most common ones that I hear when I work with parents and families is, when we talk about autism and any disability or any kind of developmental difference is, is my child going to be safe? Are they going to be able to learn? Are they going to be able to be independent? And, we might not always have the answers to those. It's a developmental process and it's a learning process. And I think a lot of learning about diagnosis and learning about autism is really getting comfortable kind of in those gray areas and really getting comfortable with kind of the unknown and saying, you know what, we're not sure. Let's work on it and then we'll wait and see. A lot of parents are worried about themselves being able to meet their kids' needs. Some kids are really high needs, and it can be really straining and really difficult on a family system to work to meet those needs and to provide the best environment for a kid. And I think that, understanding that that can be stressful, understanding that that can be a strain, and kind of worrying about stigma that their child might face or that they might face and things like that. That's a process for every caregiver, every parent, and every family member. And that's why I say kind of go back to your community, go back to your people and talk about it, share resources, and communicate with each other. And also build your own support, find your own therapy. Raising kids is tough, and it's okay to seek out the extra help. So again, kind of checking in on those assumptions about, worrying about, is my kid going to be safe? Are they going to be okay? This is one that I kind of struggle with because I grew up in an age where there was just years and years of misinformation about autism and what autism was. And the tragedy narrative was really dominant when I was growing up. And I think for a lot of people kind of my age and older, the idea of autism was kind of something scary because it was put out there. And there were some old commercials that I won't refer to because they're a little traumatic to think about, talking about what autism was. And I think what's important to know is that we've come such a long way in understanding autism as a spectrum, and not just as a line of a kind of linear spectrum, but as there's so many unique strengths and weaknesses in autistic skills and traits and styles of learning that every kid is going to be different. And when you can find their strengths and you can find how they communicate and what they need to excel, what they need to be comfortable, then you can really kind of start to deconstruct some of that stigma and some of that kind of fear and worry. I think that there's, I know that I have sent kind of recommendations to a lot of people in my testing reports from an organization called Autism Level Up. And one of the things that they recommend is kind of, there's like the strengths-based ideals and there's the kind of deficit-based model. And in the middle, there's what they call useful reality. And useful reality is where I like to live. I can't always live there because I'm not like, I'm sometimes a little bit more of a pessimist than that, but it's a good place to live because it recognizes every child's kind of unique needs, their struggles, and their strengths, and how those kind of interplay and intertwine with each other. So that's my favorite. So when is the best time to talk about diagnosis? When is the best time to have this conversation with a kid? I think the first thing I'll say is this is not a one-time conversation. It is not going to be a one-off where you sit down and have a heart-to-heart with your kid and then it's done and everybody has a good understanding of it. It's going to come up a million times throughout a kid's development. It's going to come up when they're struggling. It's going to come up at big life transitions, kind of understanding like, oh, why is this like this? Why is this so hard? Or, oh, this is such a great skill. Like I love being this way. And it's because of my autism. It's a developmental conversation, and the way you talk about it will change with your child's development. The way you talk about autism, the child when they're 5 is going to be very different than when they're 15 or when they're 25. And that's okay because they're changing, you're changing, and the world is changing around them. Again, I say make the information real, make it developmentally appropriate. Use words that your kid can understand. I might be a little bit guilty of this because I love talking about the brain. I love talking about neural networks and, oh yeah, your sensory motor strip, sometimes it's not myelinated and sometimes like the connections aren't happening between like these regions of your brain. And I know I can't do that with everybody. I can't do that with most people. It's my kind of nerding out that I love to talk about. But being able to say, hey, you know how sometimes when you get really frustrated, you can't talk? Yeah, maybe that has to do with autism. And maybe that's, something, let's figure out a way around that. Let's figure out how to work with that. And connecting kind of what's happening with them and their behaviors to this word that now they have a framework for understanding themselves about. Make it honest and make it supportive. I think, again, we want to talk to kids. We want to make everything very strengths-based, and we want to make it, superpowers and all of that, which there may be a time and a place for that. And I think that's great kind of to talk about, these are my superpowers and, I have wonderful, hearing and great attention to detail. And I remember all of this stuff. And these are just a couple of random ones of kids that I know. But also to invite that conversation for some things that might be difficult, some things that might be harder for them. whether that's making friends or sitting still in the classroom or kind of focusing on homework, that these are all parts of your kid that you love and that you accept, and that, you're going to work on, and you're going to try to take the strengths and try to help make the weaknesses and the struggles a little bit better and a little bit easier. I always tell, talk to parents, and even, when I'm working again therapeutically with a kid, I try to bring information, but I also try to bring curiosity. None of us have all the answers to everything. And, your kids are probably going to come up to you one day, if they haven't already, and ask you a question that you have no idea the answer to. They might ask you a question that has to do something with their identity, with their autism. And you're going to be like, I have no idea. Let's look it up, or let's ask your doctor. Or that might be a really great question for therapy when you see your OT or when you see your speech therapist. Let's ask them that. So when they say, well, does autism make me do this? Or is this hard because I'm autistic? You might say, like, you know what? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Let's have that conversation. Or I don't know, let's talk, let's ask somebody about that. Or, there's a million questions that a kid might come up with that, again, as a parent, this doesn't even have to do with autism. Kids are going to ask questions that you don't always know the answers to, and it's okay to approach those with curiosity and to make this idea of identity development and this idea of building confidence around an identity, making it an adventure together. So a lot of kids I know, often I'll say, after a kid gets, or after a child completes an assessment, that's a really great time to talk to them about their diagnosis. If a kid just completed 4 to 6 hours of neuropsych testing and you get the results, bringing them into that conversation, that's an awesome time to be able to talk about, oh my gosh, look at what you did, and look how smart you are, and you did awesome on this, and oof, was that one really tough for you? And being able to talk about that. A lot of kids kind of grow up diagnosed as young as 2 years old. And so they kind of grow up knowing some of these differences. They know that they go to speech therapy. They might not know why, or they know that they go to the gym and they play and they do all of this stuff. And, maybe it's never really been a conversation as to why. But being able to talk to kids, and I think it's really helpful to connect what they're doing in therapy and interventions and when they're going to all of these appointments, to be able to talk to them and be able to connect with, like, oh yeah, you went on speech therapy. Are you working on, like, your letters? Are you working on your R's? Or are you working on, like, coordination, or kind of so that you can play soccer next year? Because I know that that's what you wanted to do. Connecting that, it's okay to tell kids what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think, again, we get really scared of kids asking questions or feeling like, well, I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to be different. But when they know, it's also a lot easier as a therapist to get their buy-in and to kind of get them connected with what they're doing and the work that they're doing. So again, kind of, I feel like summarizing a little bit, we talk with curiosity. We speak with kids about curiosity because we want them to be curious about who they are. We want them to learn about themselves and ask questions and to explore and meet other people that are like them that they might be able to relate to. If they just completed an assessment or they just talked to their doctor, they might wonder, why did I do that? Why did I talk to that weird lady who made me play with blocks all day for like 3 hours? You're like, oh, well, because we wanted to see, like, how you learn best. And there's a name for how you learn best. And there's a name for how your brain works. And it's called autism. And it means that you can be really good at these things, and then kind of bringing it to what the assessment report found, and that some of these things might be more difficult for you, and then kind of pointing out some of their struggles in the assessment. And they might be able to say, like, oh yeah, I really hated that test where I was on the computer. That one was terrible. Or I really like that one where I got to draw the shapes, and kind of connecting that information to your kid, making it relate to them. I really do encourage parents, when you do an assessment, to bring your kid to the feedback, either that first time, or if it's possible, you guys go ahead as a parent, do the feedback, talk, ask questions. And then, and I've done this plenty of times, I'm happy to do it with kids, to have a second feedback session where it's just the kid getting to ask questions and it's just the kid getting to learn about themselves. I've done that plenty of times. I think it's awesome. And it's a really fun way to talk with a kid about what they're struggling with and what their strengths are, and being able to build confidence around both of those things. And again, I kind of bring it back to give yourself some grace as a parent, as a caregiver. You're not going to have all the answers. It's okay to say, we're learning about this together. You know, mom doesn't know that quite yet. We're going to learn about it together. We're going to figure it out, or we're going to talk to your teacher and we're working on it. We're going to try to figure out how to make this easier. Though it's perfectly okay to say that. You don't have to have all the answers. Another one, like I said, kind of when you're talking to your kid, no matter what the age, no matter kind of where they are developmentally, helping kids find people that they relate to. There's actually quite a bit of emerging research that shows that neurodivergent folks have actually more successful and more fulfilling conversations with other neurodivergent folks. So autistic adults, they're, you know, one of the kind of traits and markers that we look for when it comes to autism is differences in social communication and differences in how we talk in a social manner versus in a more kind of academic or formal language. So, you know, again, one of the classics is trouble with sarcasm or trouble with humor. There's quite a bit of emerging research that is kind of cool, showing that when autistic people get into groups together, a lot of the struggles with communication disappear or change, that the worries about how you communicate and how you make jokes, the anxiety around that gets lower and the communication is more fluid. So not that suddenly they're communicating without any of those social pragmatic struggles, but they're communicating with somebody else who communicates on the same level as them. So being able to build community in that way, to feel more comfortable, to feel kind of, and building that identity in a group is wonderful. It's fulfilling. It helps reduce anxiety. It helps build confidence. And of course, we always want kids to be able to have diverse friendships, being able to be friends with all different kinds of people. I think that this was another one that went back to, you know, several years ago when people were worried about, well, I don't want my kid to be influenced and start acting more, you know, acting up more, acting like this other kid. But again, we want kids to have diverse friendships, have diverse experiences, and to be able to find people that they relate to, not feeling like they're kind of the only person standing out. And kind of knowing that there's other people like them. Again, I think that this is kind of a really, really powerful thing when we see somebody else that is, you know, successful, however we define that, because they're doing well in school, or they have friends, or they're not struggling, or even if they're famous and they're talented, you know, to be able to see people like them that they relate to that are succeeding, it can be inspiring and it can be really helpful. So on my kind of tier with that, I think that this more gives away kind of, these are just random people that I happen to know of. And this more gives away like my own nerdiness, because the first person I think about as a famous autistic person is David Byrne, the lead singer of the Talking Heads, because I love the Talking Heads. But again, talking about building community, finding inspirations, finding role models, other people with autism. Greta Thunberg, the inventor of Pokemon, is autistic, which you share that one with a kid that's really into Pokemon, you have a best friend. That's just a good tip for you. Hannah Gadsby, Questlove, Anthony Hopkins, great famous people who have talked about living with autism and how it works with them and how they're able to kind of connect to that identity in a positive way that has really, really helped them identify with who they are. So again, kind of when we're talking about how do we start conversations, how do we start this discussion with a child or continue a conversation with a child about autism and what it's like. What we really want to focus on is identifying, kind of using the language that helps a kid identify what they need and who they are. You know, again, I think that kids are more insightful than we often give them credit for. They know when they're struggling. They know if they're being teased very often. They know if, you know, something's not clicking in the classroom, or if you're upset with them, they catch on to it. And so what we want to do is help them understand what's going on and how they can help themselves and how we can help them as their caregivers. I personally like to start this off by kind of talking about their brain. I have various different brain models. I have a stuffed brain, like a little plushy brain, and I have various different complicated levels of brains. And so I'll often bring those to kids and kind of tell them about the different parts of their brain and how they work and what areas are really strong for them. So for example, I might, you know, point to the back of their brain where their occipital lobe is, where they do all their visual processing. And I say, you are so good and so attentive to detail. This right here, this part of your brain is super duper strong. And then I might point to the front of their brain, the frontal lobe, where they do a lot of the focus and a lot of the attention. I'm like, this one's a little hard for you, right? This kind of maintaining your focus, is that tougher? And again, I want to use the things that they have already shared with me or that their parents have shared with me and connect it to the data that we got through testing or what I see when we're doing therapy. As a parent, you can do the same thing. Like, hey, you know, listening to loud music, you really don't like that, right? Yeah, it's because, like, you know, your hearing, it's really sensitive, and that's okay. A lot of people with autism, they have really sensitive hearing. So for me, I really like the approach of helping them understand that this is something about how they learn and how their brain works. Not that it's broken, not that it's bad, and not that it can't change, because brains change constantly. Every time we learn something new, our brain is changing. And sometimes, again, this is part of the ongoing conversation. It might not be necessarily part of that first time you guys talk about autism, but when you make it a part of kind of conversations and you bring up the curiosity, then the ongoing conversations can even include things like, what happens when things go wrong? When you have a meltdown, what's happening in your brain? One of the books I actually really like to use for this one, and I'll read it with kids sometimes, is Poppy and the Overactive Amygdala. And it kind of talks about a little part of the brain that can kind of go off and be a little bit too active. And then you kind of get, you know, it's really hard for you to regulate, isn't it? Just kind of like Poppy, and kind of relating to things in the book. I'll often use, again, kind of plushies, stuffed animals, books, anything like that that's developmentally appropriate to be able to connect with a kid, to find examples and samples of things, to connect their life experience to autism, so that they can connect the two things and know that you're not just weird, you're not broken, this is just a thing, and it's fine. And you can understand it. And when you understand it, you can work with it better. I think, again, it's about helping kids try to feel good about their diagnosis. But I also say that knowing kids have good days and bad days. And kids might come home sometimes and say, I hate this. Not even just with autism, kids saying, I hate having ADHD. I hate being dyslexic. And all of that different stuff. Sorry. I hate having ADHD. I hate having this, you know, I hate being anxious. Those days are going to happen, and that's okay. Like, it's, again, just like any other day in a kid's life. They have good days, they have bad days, and they'll probably, they're going to recover from it when you're there to support them. I saw this kind of comment in the chat. Where can I find the chart with the autism as kind of the chart? I'm not certain kind of where I found it. I'm going to go back. This one, I think you can probably Google image it and say, and just kind of look for like, like autism spectrum nonlinear or something like that, or kind of circle chart. I really do like that presentation because it makes much more sense than the kind of more or less autistic, because that's not real. But I think at the end of the day, for our kids, we want to teach them radical acceptance. There's days I don't like myself. I don't know if you guys ever have those days where you don't like yourself, you don't like parts of yourself. I might not like it that day. I still accept it. And I still accept this is the person who I am. And this is kind of how I'm going about my life. And tomorrow it's going to be different and it might be better. It probably will be better. But we practice radical acceptance and we practice kind of progress moving forward and trying harder the next day. Like I said, a lot of the information that I like to give out or kind of share comes from the autistic and the neurodivergent community themselves. So I included just a couple of links or kind of websites, books, and things like that to share, to explore with all different kind of developmental levels. For example, All My Stripes is a kid's book for probably ages like 6 and under. That's all about kind of explaining autism to kids. And I like it in part because it explains the good days and the bad days and the strengths and the weaknesses. But at the end of it, it is about acceptance, and it is about kind of being different, being beautiful and unique. Some of these are definitely kind of higher developmental level. Loud Hands is a wonderful book of essays by autistic adults kind of reflecting on their childhood experiences. Some of it's kind of hard to read because some of it is experiences that they had that were really tough or really stressful. But I think that it can be a really great learning tool. One of the ones I recommend a lot for older kids is A Field Guide to Earthlings. So this is a good one for kind of teens and above. A Field Guide A Field Guide to Earthlings is written from the autistic perspective, explaining neurotypical people. So it's a really wonderful way that most information is not shared, but taking it as, oh, we're the normal group, us neurodivergents, we're normal, and the neurotypicals, here's how you can understand them. And so I kind of like that. It's a little bit more fun in that way. A new one that I just found, I don't know if this is a new book or if I just found it, but A Day with No Words is about an AAC user and kind of how they go throughout their day, kind of communicating with their parents and feeling heard and feeling accepted through using their AAC. So if any of you guys have kids that are new to AAC or even have been using it for a while, I really like A Day with No Words. It's definitely a younger kids book. So again, probably 7 and younger, but it's a lovely book. The illustrations are really pretty too. And it's one of the first books, like storybooks I've seen that is really about using AAC and about alternative communication. So a couple of social medias, just various ones to follow that can kind of give you guys more information. Most of these, I believe, are on Instagram and probably other of the social medias and YouTube channels. That again, just kind of give information, different perspectives. I think that there's no way in the world that any professional, no matter how long of a presentation I had, could share all of the perspectives from what it's like to be neurodivergent or anything else, but having a lot of other resources and talking to both other professionals and other autistic people to learn about kind of what's supportive for them and what they really need, what they wish they had when they were kids. Because then as a parent now, you can be like, oh, okay, that's good to know. I think not a shocker to a lot of you parents probably is that a lot of it is sensory supports. A lot of what kind of people on social media are saying is, as a kid, I wish I had ear defenders. As a kid, I wish I had like these types of clothes with no tags or something like that. Because again, as you guys probably know, when the sensory struggles are low, most of the other struggles are low too. So not all the time, but a lot of the time. So that is all I had for you guys. So I kind of want to open it up to conversation, any questions, anything like that.